The May sun beat down on the Stanford University graduation ceremony as 23,000 people filled the stadium. I sat in the sea of red caps and gowns, my computer science PhD finally complete after 6 grueling years. Around me, my classmates were taking selfies and texting family members, their faces glowing with excitement and relief. I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from my parents, but no congratulatory messages. Instead, there was a single text from Dad that made my stomach drop. "Your mother and I have discussed it. After today, don't expect any help from us. You're 28 years old and it's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. We're cutting off all financial support effective immediately." I stared at the message, feeling a familiar mix of hurt and frustration. Even on my graduation day, a day that should have been about celebrating my achievements, Dad was finding a way to remind me that I was a disappointment. The truth was, I hadn't asked for their help in over 4 years. I'd been supporting myself through graduate school with research assistantships, teaching positions, and what Dad dismissively called my computer hobby. But in his mind, I was still the irresponsible child who needed constant reminders about financial reality. "Alex, you okay?" whispered Jessica, the friend sitting next to me. "You look like you just got bad news." I showed her the text. Her jaw dropped. "On your graduation day? Seriously? What kind of parent?" "The kind who thinks I'm wasting my life," I said quietly. According to Dad, getting a PhD in computer science was just an excuse to avoid getting a real job for 6 more years. Jessica shook her head in disbelief. Around us, families were cheering and taking photos as graduates walked across the stage. I could see other parents in the stands, beaming with pride as their children received their diplomas. My parents were somewhere in the crowd too, but apparently more concerned with teaching me life lessons than celebrating my accomplishment. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from Mom. "Your father is right, Alexandra. It's time to grow up and face the real world. We won't be bailing you out anymore." Bailing me out? I hadn't asked them for money since my sophomore year of undergrad. In fact, I'd been sending them money recently. Small amounts when I knew they were struggling with bills, always disguised as gifts or loans I insisted they didn't need to repay. "Dr. Alexandra Bennett," called the announcer, and I realized it was finally my turn to cross the stage. I walked across the platform in a daze, shook hands with the dean and accepted my diploma. The PhD I'd worked 60-hour weeks to earn, the research that had already been cited in dozens of academic papers, the algorithms I'd developed that were being used by major tech companies, all of it suddenly felt diminished by my parents' message. As I walked back to my seat, my phone rang. The caller ID showed David Chin, CFO, and I almost declined the call. David was my chief financial officer at Spectrum Analytics, the company I'd founded in my 2nd year of grad school. He knew I was at graduation and wouldn't call unless it was urgent. "David, I'm literally at my graduation ceremony," I whispered as I answered. "Alex, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have news that couldn't wait." His voice was practically vibrating with excitement. "The IPO launched 15 minutes ago." My heart started pounding. We'd been preparing for this initial public offering for 8 months, but the final approval had come through just last week. I'd been so focused on finishing my dissertation that I'd almost forgotten today was the launch date. "And?" I asked, though I could tell from his tone it was good news. "Alex, we priced at $28 per share, which was already above our target range. But the market response..." He paused for dramatic effect. "We opened at $47 and we're currently trading at $52. The company is valued at $6.2 billion. The words hit me like a physical blow. $6.2 billion. I own 73% of Spectrum Analytics, which meant, Alex, are you there? He just became a billionaire. A multi-billionaire. I was so shocked that I forgot to lower my voice. Are you serious? $6.2 billion. Several graduates around me turned to stare. Jessica's eyes went wide. Dead serious. The Wall Street Journal is calling it the most successful tech IPO in 5 years. CNBC wants an interview this afternoon. Bloomberg is running a feature on you as the youngest female billionaire in tech. Alex, you did it. I was trying to process this information when I noticed that more people around me were listening. The words billion and IPO had a way of cutting through graduation ceremony chatter. David, I'm surrounded by people. Can we talk about this later? Of course, but Alex, there's one more thing. Goldman Sachs is predicting the stock will hit $65 by the end of the week. If they're right, we're looking at a $7.8 billion valuation. My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. Jessica grabbed my arm. Did he just say billion? With a B. I nodded, still in shock. Around us, other graduates were staring and whispering. The news was spreading through our section like wildfire. That's when I saw my parents making their way down the stadium steps toward the graduate seating area. Mom was clutching her purse tightly, her face set in the stern expression she wore when she was about to deliver a lecture. Dad was checking his phone, probably preparing to send another message about my need to become financially responsible. They reached the edge of the graduate section just as my phone rang again. This time it was Maria Santos, our head of public relations. Alex, congratulations. The IPO is already making headlines. I have interview requests from every major business publication. The Today Show wants you on tomorrow morning, and Fortune is fast-tracking a cover story. I could see my parents getting closer, pushing through the crowd of families and graduates. They clearly had more to say about my financial irresponsibility. Maria, I'm still at graduation. I know, and I'm sorry to call, but this is huge. Spectrum Analytics is being called the next Google. Your facial recognition software is going to revolutionize everything from security to social media. The Pentagon contract alone is worth $400 million. My parents were now close enough to hear if I spoke at normal volume. Part of me wanted to hang up and avoid the confrontation. But another part of me, the part that had been dismissed and criticized for years, decided it was time they heard the truth. Maria, can you repeat that? I want to make sure I heard the numbers correctly. Of course. Spectrum Analytics went public this morning at a $6.2 billion valuation. Your 73% stake makes you worth approximately $4.5 billion. The Pentagon contract is worth $400 million. Microsoft just licensed your technology for $200 million, and we have deals pending with Apple, Amazon, and Facebook. I put the call on speaker. The facial recognition algorithms you developed are being called a breakthrough in artificial intelligence. MIT is offering you a full professorship, and the National Science Foundation wants to fund your next research project with a $50 million grant. The graduates around me had gone completely silent. Even the families nearby had stopped talking to listen to this surreal phone conversation happening in the middle of a graduation ceremony. My parents reached my row just as Maria continued. Alex, you're about to be one of the most famous entrepreneurs in America. The story is already trending on social media. Stanford PhD student becomes billionaire on graduation day, is the top headline on every business website. Dad's face had gone completely white. The phone he'd been holding slipped from his hand and clattered onto the concrete steps. Also, Maria added, I should mention that the university is already planning to name the new computer science building after you. The $100 million donation you committed will fund scholarships for underprivileged students for the next 50 years. Mom made a small choking sound. Maria, thank you for the update. Let's schedule a proper meeting for tomorrow to discuss the media strategy. Absolutely. And Alex, congratulations. You've built something incredible. I hung up and looked at my parents who were standing frozen in the aisle like statues. Dad's mouth was hanging open, and Mom was clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad, I said quietly. I got your text about not expecting help anymore. The graduation ceremony was continuing around us, but our little section had become its own bubble of shocked silence. Other families were staring openly now, realizing they were witnessing some kind of family drama involving a billionaire. Alexandra, Dad finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. What just happened? I became a billionaire, I said simply. The company I founded went public this morning. Spectrum Analytics develops artificial intelligence for facial recognition, security systems, and social media platforms. But you're a student, Mom said weakly. You don't have a company. You're getting your PhD in computer science. I have both. I founded Spectrum Analytics during my second year of graduate school. We started with a $50,000 grant and grew from there. The technology one developed for my dissertation became the foundation for our core products. Jessica leaned over. Alex, you never told us you owned a company. I don't really talk about it. I preferred to focus on my research and let the business team handle operations. but we've been growing steadily for 4 years. We have offices in Silicon Valley, Austin, and Boston with about 300 employees. Dad sat down heavily on the concrete steps, his face pale. 300 employees? As of last month, yes. We've been hiring aggressively to keep up with demand. The AI revolution is happening faster than anyone expected, and our algorithms are considered industry-leading. I pulled out my phone and showed them the Spectrum Analytics website, which now featured a prominent banner announcing the IPO success. The Pentagon contract Maria mentioned is for next-generation security systems. The Microsoft deal is integrating our technology into their cloud services. And the university partnerships will fund research labs at Stanford, MIT, and Carnegie Mellon. Mom finally found her voice. Alexandra, if you have all this money, all this success, why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were struggling financially? The question I'd been dreading. I looked at these two people who had raised me, supported me through undergrad, and then spent the last 6 years making me feel like a failure for pursuing graduate school. Because every time I tried to tell you about my work, you dismissed it as a waste of time, I said gently. Remember when I tried to explain machine learning algorithms at Christmas dinner 2 years ago? Dad told me to stop talking nonsense and focus on finding a husband. Dad winced. Or when I mentioned that my research was getting attention from tech companies, and Mom said I was living in a fantasy world and needed to prepare for the real job market? Mom's eyes filled with tears. I stopped trying to share my successes because you'd already decided I was irresponsible and unrealistic. It was easier to let you believe what you wanted to believe than to constantly defend myself. A graduate sitting behind us tapped my shoulder. Excuse me, are you really worth $4.5 billion? I nodded. As of about 20 minutes ago, yes. Dude, you're famous. Your IPO is all over Twitter. They're calling you the youngest self-made female billionaire in tech history. More people were pulling out their phones, probably Googling my name and finding the news articles that were apparently already being published. I could see the exact moment when strangers realized they were sitting next to someone who had just made financial history. But all I cared about was the two people standing in front of me, looking like their entire worldview had just been shattered. Dad, I said, you texted me this morning saying I need to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. I've been standing on my own feet for 4 years. I've been running a company, managing employees, securing contracts with the biggest tech companies in the world, and conducting research that's advancing the field of artificial intelligence. I stood up, my graduation gown billowing around me. You said I was wasting my time getting a PhD instead of getting a real job. This PhD isn't just a degree. It's the foundation of technology that's going to change how computers understand and interact with the world. The research I've been doing isn't theoretical anymore. It's being implemented by companies with billions of users. The ceremony was still ongoing, but more people in our section were openly listening to our conversation now. Some were recording with their phones, probably planning to post about witnessing this moment on social media. But most importantly, I continued, you told me not to expect help from you anymore. That's fine because I haven't needed help in years. In fact, I've been helping you. I pulled up my banking app and showed them a series of transactions going back 2 years. The mysterious gift card that paid for Mom's car repairs last year? That was me. The scholarship that covered cousin Emma's college tuition? That was the Spectrum Analytics Educational Foundation, which I personally fund. The anonymous donation that saved Dad's bowling league when they couldn't afford new equipment? Also me. Dad stared at the phone screen, his face cycling through emotions I couldn't identify. I've been taking care of this family quietly for years, I said. Not because you asked me to, but because I love you. Because despite your constant criticism of my choices, you're still my parents. Mom was crying openly now. Alexandra, we didn't know. We thought you were struggling. We thought we were helping by pushing you to be more realistic. I understand why you were worried. But you never asked about my actual situation. You assumed I was failing because my path didn't look like what you expected success to look like. A reporter had somehow gotten into the graduate section and was making her way toward us with a camera crew. I realized this conversation was about to become very public very quickly. Mom, Dad, we need to finish this conversation somewhere private. I think we're about to be surrounded by media. Dad looked around and seemed to notice for the first time that we had attracted a considerable amount of attention. Graduates and families were openly staring, phones were out recording, and there was definitely a news crew approaching. Alexandra, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. We owe you an apology. We've been so wrong about everything. We can talk about it later. Right now, I need to get out of here before this becomes a circus. But it was too late. The reporter reached us just as security started trying to clear a path. Alexandra Bennett? I'm Jennifer Walsh from CNBC. Congratulations on the IPO success. Can you tell us how it feels to become a billionaire on your graduation day? Cameras were rolling, phones were recording, and my parents were standing there looking completely overwhelmed by the sudden media attention. It feels surreal, I said honestly. 6 years ago I came to Stanford to pursue research in artificial intelligence. I never expected it would lead to this level of commercial success. What's next for Spectrum Analytics? We're focused on continuing our research partnerships with universities and expanding our work in ethical AI development. The goal has always been to create technology that benefits society, not just generate profits. And what about your parents? They must be proud of your success. I looked at Mom and Dad, who were still processing everything that had happened in the last 30 minutes. My parents have always supported my education, even when they didn't understand my career path. I'm grateful for the foundation they gave me. It was a diplomatic answer that protected their dignity while acknowledging the complicated truth of our relationship. The reporter asked a few more questions, but security was already moving us toward a private area where families could congratulate graduates without media interference. As we walked away from the cameras, Dad finally spoke. Alexandra, I need you to know that I'm proud of you. I'm so proud I don't even have words for it. And I'm ashamed of myself for not seeing what you were building. Dad. No, let me say this. I thought I was protecting you by pushing you toward what I saw as stability. But you were already building something more stable than anything I ever imagined. You were building the future. We reached a quiet area under some trees, away from the crowds and cameras. I'm sorry, he continued. I'm sorry for the text this morning. I'm sorry for years of making you feel like your dreams weren't valid. I'm sorry for not trusting you to know what was best for your own life. Mom stepped forward and hugged me tightly. We're so proud of you, sweetheart. And we're so sorry we made you feel like you had to hide your success from us. You didn't have to hide it, I said. I chose to because I wanted to focus on the work rather than the money. But I should have tried harder to help you understand what I was doing. What you were doing was changing the world, Dad said. And we were too busy worrying about conventional success to see it. My phone buzzed with another call from David. The financial world was apparently moving fast today. I should take this, I said. David, what's the update? Alex, we just crossed $7 billion in market cap. And there's something else. Goldman Sachs wants to discuss a secondary offering that could value the company at $10 billion within 6 months. I looked at my parents, who were listening with expressions of wonder and disbelief. Also, David continued, the White House just called. They want to discuss your joining a presidential advisory committee on artificial intelligence and national competitiveness. The White House. I repeated. The president personally requested you for the committee. Apparently, your work is considered essential to maintaining America's technological leadership. I hung up and turned to my parents, who looked like they were having trouble processing any more shocking news. So, I said with a smile, I guess I should update my resume. Dad laughed, for the first time since he'd arrived at graduation. I think your resume is probably fine, he said. But Alexandra, I want you to know that whether you were worth $4 or $4 billion, you're still my daughter and I love you. I love you too, Dad. Both of you. And despite what happened this morning, I'm glad you're here for my graduation. We wouldn't have missed it for the world, Mom said. Even if we didn't understand how significant today really was. As we walked back toward the graduation ceremony, which was still ongoing, I realized that becoming a billionaire wasn't the most important thing that had happened today. The most important thing was that my parents finally understood who I really was, and that despite years of misunderstandings, our family was still intact. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Your IPO is the top trending topic on Twitter. Also, can I get your autograph? I want to tell people I graduated with a billionaire. I laughed and showed the text to my parents. I guess our daughter is famous now, Mom said. She always was, Dad replied. We just didn't know it yet. That evening, as I sat in my small apartment, which I'd probably be moving out of soon, I reflected on how much my life had changed in a single day. I'd graduated with my PhD, become a billionaire, gained international recognition, and most importantly, reconnected with my parents in a meaningful way. My phone had been buzzing constantly with interview requests, congratulations from colleagues, and investment opportunities. But the message that meant the most was a simple text from Dad. Proud of you, kiddo. Always have been, even when I was too stubborn to show it. Tomorrow I would start navigating life as a public figure and billionaire entrepreneur. But tonight I was just Alexandra, a daughter who had finally proven to her parents that her dreams were worth pursuing, even when they didn't understand them.